All right. Hello, everyone. How is it going? As you can see, I'm very happy to be here. Just had a little fun with our Becca and team here. They do a great job of putting me here. And so I'm here. Welcome to another one of our sessions. This is your host, your servant, your teacher. Yeah, we're with you another one of our live sessions on YouTube. And today is the 17th, in most places, unless you're joining me in Canada. And we are doing another one of our AS sessions today. So, if you had joined us last week, same time, same day, I did the, not we, it was my friend, just kidding. So, we did together, we did a whole session on how to attempt a paper one. So I pretended to be a student, and then I was going through the whole process of how I would go about answering the questions, what are the things to remember about 2 mark questions, three, etc., etc. And we went through the entire paper, and it ended up looking like this. Chaotic, yet there is some sense in this process. So we attempted to 3, 5, 8, and 12 mark questions each type. And I intend to do a similar session today for paper 2. So, as always, I would be very happy to answer any questions that you might have. So, the chat, although is delayed by 20 seconds, but that's just a tech limitation. We'll work with that. But should you have any questions, any comments for me, if you don't know why I haven't shaved in a while, it's because I'm just waiting for 3 more days. Maybe I can still get through this. I don't know, you tell me. Your comments are always welcome. And yeah, it is showing my real age, isn't it? So the wise one is what I'm going to go with today. So yeah, let's get on with it. Like I said, if you have anything, just write it in the chat window and I'll be happy to respond. So, since this is paper 2, let me first start off by describing you the differences between paper 1 and paper 2 and the similarities. Okay, now first off, let's look at the similarities, things that you will still need, the knowledge that will still need to take from paper 1 to paper 2, things to expect would be that the way you answer an 8 and a 12 mark question in section B. And by the way, I mean that for 8 marks, we know there are 2 marks for knowledge, 2 for application, 4 for analysis. You are asked to talk about any 2 points, so you divide that into 2 equally weighted paragraphs. Each paragraph starts with a bit of knowledge, then you bring the application. And in an 8 marker, you're not generally given a particular type of business or a case study in paper 1. So you're just asked to explain through any business situation, any business terminology. So you create your own application, and then you show the advantages and disadvantages of that particular point that you're making. And you make 2 of those points. So you have 2 paragraphs, that 8 marks. So that framework, that format, that structure still applies in paper 2. And when I get to an 8 marker, I will explain it again. So you will need that information going forward. Similarly, the 12 marker, the way of answering a 12 marker is the same as a paper 1. So what that means is that you're still are given 2 marks for knowledge, 2 for application, 2 for analysis, and 6 for evaluation. You generally divide your answer into 3 paragraphs. You can do it even 4. There's no set rule about the number of paragraphs. You know, as you please. And what I recommend for making paragraphs is that whenever you feel that your answer is talking about a different point, a completely new angle to your structure, to your essay, that's when you make a paragraph. You know, you want the paragraphing is only meant to get the attention of the examiner. So whenever you feel like you really want them to see a different way of explaining, then that's where you make a paragraph. Okay, so divide into 3 to 4 paragraphs. The final paragraph is definitely an evaluation. And a 12 marker, the questions asking you to decide something for the business, whether it's good or bad, should they do it, should they not do it, is it a good idea or bad idea? So you answer that question, and then you give your reasoning for it. So that's structure for a 12 marker, which actually I can show you if I zoom in here. So this is what we did last week with a 12 marker, right? And just things that I want you to recall from that is that, you know, I had 3 paragraphs here. First paragraph is a full combination of a bit of knowledge, application, analysis, similar to the way you make an 8 marker. So up to this point, a 12 marker is the same as an 8 marker. The difference is that at the end of each paragraph, you leave a comment of evaluation. because it's worth 6 marks, so you want to have enough evaluation in your answer. Okay. By the way, examiners also say that you don't have to wait till the end of the paragraph to give an evaluative comment. You can give it in the middle. So the structure of the paragraph is up to you, as long as it has knowledge, application, analysis, and evaluation. So you make 2 or 3 paragraphs depending on the question, and then the final paragraph is a purely evaluative paragraph, which is where, and I will ask you to, if you don't remember this from the last session, write them down again. That, and this is what my thought process is for whenever I'm attempting the evaluation part of answers, is that I go through these 5 layers. So this is a checklist of my evaluation. These are the things I think about when I'm answering for the evaluation part. So one is that you'll be asked a question that evaluate this view. So for example, this question asked us to discuss whether cash and profit are different for a small business. So is that right or wrong? Yes or no? That's what you have to definitely answer for a 12 marker. So judgment. Then if you have any solutions for them, provide that in your evaluation in the last paragraph. If you feel that anything that might create any problems, any obstacles going forward, that's what you mentioned in the last paragraph. Any changes in the external environment, economy changing, competition increasing, social changes, that's what you bring in evaluation. And if a decision in one department has any impact on the other department. So here the question was, if you're not able to save enough cash, what happens? Well, if you don't have enough cash, then in another department, which probably be operations, they will not be able to buy enough inventory to produce. So these 5 layers are what I'm thinking about whenever I'm evaluating. So we'll take this same framework, same structure for the paper 2 12 marker as well. Okay. Now, the other similarity is that you will be asked some definition. So instead of a 2 marker, there'll be a 3 mark definition. So that's where the similarities end for paper 1 and paper 2, is that 8 and 12 markers are answered the same way, and you're still asked to define things. The differences, and the major difference, this is really the make or break of your understanding of a paper 2, is that you are given a case study, a business in question. A business will be explained through multiple departments. So marketing will be doing something, finance, HR, etc. And your knowledge will be tested about how can you solve that business's problem from your understanding of the syllabus. So what is absolutely locked about the question is that the application comes from the case study. You can't create your own scenarios. You can't say, if this happens, assuming this, what if this were to happen? Nothing can be assumed to bring in. You can add on things through your analysis, that's fine, but to create application, you have to take the situation from the case study that's given. So that's the first thing that you have to remember. And what I advise your mindset when you're looking at a paper 2 case study is that approach it from the point of view of a consultant who understands what it takes to run a business, and you've been asked to solve that business's problems. And that's where you have to write essay answers to give them solutions. So it's always from the point of view of a consultant. So if it's something that suits the owner, support the owners. If in a scenario you want to support the customer, make sure you're making the right decision for the business going forward, right? So that's where it's a little bit different from paper 1, the application part. Secondly, there is obviously calculation in paper 2. There are 2 calculations that are worth 3 marks each, so 6 marks of calculation. You'll give also a 1 mark question, which is an identify question, which is a real gimme. You just write 1 or 2 words and get on with it. So that's where you'll see some new things as well. All right. So with that understanding, Walaikum Salam, Yasir, how are you? Will you give guest papers? Yes, I will be sharing guest papers closer to the exam for sure. I just want to go through a few more papers before I'm ready to give out my guest paper for the year. Right, so let's move on, and this is the paper I have for today. So the recent session that passed November 2025, this is variant 22, and as we know that when your paper 2 is of 1 hour 30 minutes, and you're given 2 different case studies to answer, which means each case study will give you 45 minutes. I will also tell you how many minutes roughly you have per question to answer. But in total, per case study, from the moment you start till you end, you will have 45 minutes on average. Okay, now that's ideal. What really ends up happening, what you have to be prepared for in your exams, is that when you attempt the first case study, you are naturally inclined to do really well in all questions. So you will probably spend a little bit more time in the first case study, and you may go over your 45-minute marker unless you're really good on time management. You may end up using 50-52 minutes for your first case study, which will then eat into the time you would have for the second case study. So you might feel a little bit rushed if you get to the end of the paper where you're attempting the 12th marker of the second case study. The last question would be a 12 marker. Okay, so don't be alarmed. That's all natural. If you practice at home, your time management will obviously get better. But there's one thing that you absolutely should not do, right? Absolutely should not, which is answering the questions in reverse. So don't start with a 12 marker and go to an 8 marker thinking that, oh, these are big mark questions and I can score easily. I'll give you the logic behind it. The logic is that if you start from part A and B, part A is very easy, 1 mark and 3 mark questions. That's 4 marks that must be taken, 4 out of 4. Then a 3-mark calculation with enough practice, you can get them all right. So those are 7 marks that you are guaranteed to be given, which you can do in much less time than 12 marks. If you attempt to 12 marker, then 12 markers, 9 is a great mark, right? Usually people get about 6, 7, 8 is a good answer. So if you're going to spend more time in really 7, 8 is what you're realistically going to get from 12 marker, then it's not worth spending that time in the beginning. So do not switch up the sequence. Start with part A because it's easy. Part B is easy. Part C, which is an 8 marker. By attempting the 8 marker, your understanding of the case study will build up more. And only then will you be able to attempt the 12 marker, for which you need the entire case study's understanding. So that process is defined for a reason. So make sure you do that. Okay. We will be answering a 12 marker, Yasser, today. Do not worry. So I will start my process of answering this case study now. And what I do normally and what I recommend is that you first quickly look at the 8 and 12 mark question that's given, because you want to know, it's actually a good idea to look at all the questions. So give it a good glance and we'll just quickly look at, so we know what we're up with, what we're up against today. So part A, the first part A1 will be a 1 mark identify question, where we'll ask to identify one external stakeholder of a business partnership. Then it will be followed by a second part, which will ask to explain. Okay, now explain means you will have to show a little bit of application here as well. So when it comes to A part 2, what you have to remember, and I'll just write it down here, that you're given 1 mark for knowledge and you're still given 2 marks for application. So what is outsourcing and how it operates, that's what I'll have to do here. Then B part 1 will be a calculation, and this one here is a calculation about budget variance. And remember, as I said, that the newer calculations are tested more and more. So that's why I'm not surprised to see budget variance being tested. May even be tested in your sessions. That calculation, capacity utilization, they're new to the case study and I would look at them more closely. B part 2 will be connected to the calculation. It'll be an easy one. And then part C and part D, as I explained, are 8 and 12 mark questions, the same way as paper 1, the only difference being that the application comes from the case study. And one more thing that I want to tell you about the difference between paper 1 and paper 2's 8 and 12 marker is that since paper 1, you have to create your own application, you're generally writing more and more, so your 8 and 12 markers in paper 1 would be a lot longer. So for paper 1, you're looking at a page to page and a quarter, and 12 marker, page and a half in paper 1. In paper 2 and 8 marker, you will probably struggle to fill up an entire page. You're looking at 3/4 of a page to almost a page, because there's only so much application given in the case study, and that's what you have to use. So don't worry if your answer is a little bit shorter in paper 2 as compared to paper 1. Okay, yes, Yasir, that would be correct for 8. And then there will be this 12 marker. So the 8 marker is asking us to analyze 2 possible limitations for LAF as a labor intensive operation. So when I am looking at this question, I'll probably highlight this part, that it's about operations, and in particular the operations are going to get a little bit more labor intensive. So what I'll think of immediately is that it's probably a comparison between labor and capital intensive. What are the two limitations of being labor intensive? One is that there's an additional labor cost. Two, they need breaks, so there's no 24/7 production. They also make mistakes, so quality cannot be guaranteed. So those points will automatically come rushing back in my mind, and that's what I'll be looking for in the case study, right? That's why we read the questions before we read the case study. Then evaluate the most important responsibility that Drake has as the owner of LAF. So owner and responsibility, I'm going to connect that to entrepreneurship. So who is an entrepreneur? What are the qualities? What do they need to do? That's probably going to be part of the case study. So part D is clearly from the first unit, business and its environment. Part C is clearly from unit 4, operations. Part B, definitely unit 5, finance. And this one is a combination of unit 1 and unit 4. So yeah, one more thing that I want to say about paper 2 is that since you're given 2 case studies, the examiner makes sure that across the 2 case studies, they test you over all of the 5 units. So in this one, for example, we see questions from unit 1, unit 4, and unit 5, right? Business and its environment, operations and finance. Those are the 3 clearly obvious units that are being tested. The other case study in the same paper would definitely have questions on the other 2 departments, the other 2 units, which are marketing and HR. And I can assure you that's what I did see in that paper. So make sure that you don't skip anything thinking that, oh, unit 1 and 3 were tested in paper 1, it will not be tested in paper 2. That is absolutely not true. You will be tested on all 5 units equally in paper 2. So expect that. Oh, that was a big cut from my end. Anyways, hello, Sonala, how are you? Sonala, I will get into more detail of this. You are pretty much there. If I'm reading this answer, I'm giving you 2 out of 3. Because I want to see one more layer of application as well. Let me get to that question and then I will answer it for you. Okay, right, people. So now that we understand that what the case study is about, it's about entrepreneurship, labor-intensive operations, and budgets. Then what I would do is I go through reading the case study once completely. Okay, with the thought in my mind that I have to look for anything linked to entrepreneurship, anything linked to labor intensive, anything linked to budgeting and finance. Okay, so let's read it. So you will see a name of the business, Law Advice Forum, LAF, and then Drake, I'm guessing this is the owner. So Drake has a law degree and works for a partnership of lawyers during the day. Drake owns, and by night he is Batman. No, I hope it was that, but it isn't. So Drake owns a website that gives free legal advice. So this is his own business, right? So Drake owns a website that gives free legal advice. So free stuff, he's just doing that in his spare time. He works on the website in the evening and at the weekend. So that's the time that he is giving to it right now. So I would say it's more of, and that's what they say, right? So he started the website as a hobby. So it was a hobby to him because he was doing law work during the day. So he thought I'll use that knowledge to do something of my own on the side. So side hustle, as you might call it. So he started the website as a hobby, but the website has grown to over 20,000 users, and he now sells advertising on his videos and on the website. So we can see that he started becoming a little bit self-reliant in the sense that he's getting revenue by selling advertising on his website, and his followership has grown to 20,000. So there's a clue for him there that this might be worth looking into more seriously. Then Drake uses outsourcing. So this question we'll be discussing. So Drake uses outsourcing, and I'll probably just highlight it here, using outsourcing for some areas of his website. And as the later data suggests, that he gets his finances done by somebody else. So he has recently been sent a report showing variances in the budget from the previous month. See table 2.1. And anytime you see a table like this, you know that this is the information you will need for your calculation question. So in this table, we're given revenue, budgeted and actual. So this is what they thought would happen. This is what really happened. and we're given that data for revenue, cost, and profit, and we'll have to find a variance of something. So we'll get to that when that question comes around. Then this is the rest of the case study. Drake has now left his job and is focusing full time on the website. So he's become more independent. He's become an entrepreneur now. He rebranded the website as Law Advice Forum LAF. Drake's business plan for LAF included, so business plan, as we know, is an important piece of document written to make sure that you have clear idea of where the business is headed. And then you're given, so whenever you see bullet points, now this is a great clue by the examiner that look, these are the points that we absolutely want you to talk about. So whenever you see bullet points, that's the biggest clue of application that must be in your answer. Okay. So in his business plan, he set out these 6 points, and I'll show you how to go about answering a question where you're given a list of things to do. So one part of business plan is that operating as a sole trader. So I guess that part's important. He'll have to take care of a lot of responsibilities, so he needs to be up to the mark. Continuing to develop and expand the website to provide legal advice and paid legal services. So at some point he will need to find other sources of revenue. One is obviously advertising, and he'll need to find other revenue. Then renting an office in City G where all employees would work. So you need an office space. Without that, it's difficult to operate. Hiring 5 fully qualified lawyers. So if you're going to charge people for legal advice, then you will need to have qualified people. So hiring is clearly on the agenda. Hiring 3 administrators. So another obviously objective would be to look at people who can manage the business as it grows. And then lastly, leasing IT equipment. So if you're going to run a website, you need IT equipment. And that's another expense that they are foreseeing. However, Drake is concerned about the limitations LAF will face as a labor-intensive operations. So that's all the clue we're given for the 8-mark question, that look, they are becoming more serious, so they're getting IT equipment, and that means less labor would be needed. Is that good or bad? That's what we are asked to talk about, and clearly we are asked to talk about limitations. So what's wrong with bringing in more labor? We're bringing in, what are the limitations of labor-intensive operation? Basically, that's what we're going to be discussing. So that's the case study, right? So you'll have to give it a full read over at least once. Now we understand what the business is about. So if I could just quickly recap it. Drake was working in a law firm. He realized that he could start his own business. He did that through a website, which now has 20,000 users. He gets his budgeting done by an outsourced company. He has now become serious and rebranded the firm. And he now has a plan to run it on his own with 6 things on his agenda. Okay. Now, once you've read it, then obviously you go to the questions, and these are the 4 questions we have to attempt. Right now, the first question, which is an identify question, part A has question A has 2 parts, one part A, one part 2, right? So what I'm just going to do is these 2 questions, I'm just going to bring them to the side here, right? All I've done here is I brought them to the side here so that I have space to write answers. Okay, nothing different. Same questions, just more space to write. So let's begin. Now, when answering this question, you have to be quick about it. 1 marker. You will need just 1 minute for answering this. And since this is a 1-mark question, you're given 1 mark for knowledge, and you're asked to identify only one external stakeholder of a business partnership, right? So we know there are many. Yasir's already identified one as the government. You could write the supplier, you could write customers, you could write banks, you could write community. So keep it simple. You don't need a full definition here. You don't need a full sentence. I could simply write the word government and move on. Okay, so government or supplier, or I'm not saying and, this is not the Urdu wala, or English, or, so any one of this, or customer would do the job. Okay, that's all. Don't spend more than 30 seconds to a minute on this to think, and just go ahead. Okay, Then the second part, A2, is an explain and a 3-mark question. And a 3-mark question which starts with the word explain, the requirements are, let me just fix my pen. The requirements are you're given 1 mark for knowledge and 2 for application. Okay, now this brings me to another difference of paper 1 and paper 2. Okay, in paper 1, 3-mark question, you don't write the definition. Remember that. They are asking you about advantages, disadvantages, factors, and a 3-mark question in paper 1. This is paper 2. And this starts with asking you to explain the term, the entire term. Okay. So when you are asked to explain the term in a 3-mark paper 2 question, you must write the definition. So this first mark of knowledge is for a definition. So in paper 1, 3-marker, do not write the definition. In paper 2, 3-marker, definitely write the definition. And then you explain what it does or how it operates in the 2 lines of application that will follow. So I will write the answer here for you now. I've learned that I type better, or faster at least. So I don't know about better. So I'll do that here. Okay, so I will write outsourcing. Outsourcing is the process of getting part or full production done or performed by a third party. Okay, now that's good enough for 1 mark of knowledge. I need more than that. I have to score 2 for application, which means I need to either in 1 sentence connect 2 things of application or in 2 layers. So what I recommend is that this is your 1 chance, right? So don't leave things undecided. Don't leave things to chance. What you must do is that give 2 proper applications. Try 2 things of how outsourcing works or how it benefits, so that there is no margin for error. So what I will say is that businesses use outsourcing to access better quality production processes or materials, right? So this is the reason why you do it, or this is how you perform it, that you get something that's being done by somebody else. It might be better than what you're doing. You get it done from them. This allows them to improve quality and charge higher. Oh, what did I do? Sorry. This allows them to improve quality and add value to the product. So I'm not going into analysis at all, which means that I'm not explaining that what are the advantages or disadvantages. I'm simply talking about the process of outsourcing, how it is performed. So this would be good enough for a 3-mark answer of paper 2. Okay, definition for sure, and then just 2 clear layers of application. No, an example is not required, so you don't have to talk about a real business. What I've done here, Sonala, is actually just sort of given an example of how a business would do it without mentioning any names, right? So that's good enough. You don't have to give an example for sure. Okay, so with that, if I can go back to the case study and start checking off the things that we are managing. So A, part 1 done, part 2 done. Now we're looking at B, part 1, which is a calculation question. Okay, so let's read it. Now, the first line is the biggest clue in a calculation question. Okay, so pay attention. It says refer to table 2.1, full stop. Now, there are 2 ways this question could have started. One is like the one that you see here, that refer to table 2.1, full stop, which means that all the numbers that you need to work with for this calculation will be found within that table. Okay, nothing outside of the table will be required to answer this question. However, there's another way this question could have started, which would be that refer to table 2.1 and other information, full stop. Which means that you will look at the table that they're asking you to look at, and you will definitely need another number from the paragraph somewhere. Okay, so that is a big clue that should I limit my focus to just the table, or do I need to look at the case study as a whole to see what other number I need for that calculation. So make sure you read the first line carefully. This one is the easier of the two, so we'll only look at the table. And they're asking us to calculate the profit variance for Drake's website in the previous month. There's two parts to this. So calculate the variance and state whether the variance is favorable or adverse. So they need two things from you. Now, to answer the 3-mark question, you're given 3 marks, 1 for the right formula, 1 for the right equation, and 1 for the right answer. Okay, so make sure you have those 3 layers given here, and the way to calculate profit variance. And again, what I'm going to do is take this question and bring it to another part of my screen here so that I have space to write. So I can get the first mark straight away by writing the formula. So I'll do that first, that variance, excuse me 1 second, variance is equal to the budgeted amount, so budget minus actual. Okay, so now I've got to look for only the profit variance. They've given us 3 different pieces of variances. They've given us revenue, cost, and profit. I only need to look at profit. So I'll go back to the case study. Here's my table. Revenue is given, cost is given, but I only need to look at profit equation. So 3,900 was budgeted, 3,200 is what actually happened. So 3,900 and 3,200. Going back to my answer sheet, my equation then becomes so PV is profit variance is equal to 3,900 minus excuse me 3,250, which is $6.50. Okay, now if you only left it at this, you will only get 2 marks, because they also ask you to decide whether is it favorable or is it adverse. And since we are talking about profit, you thought more and you ended up with less. Okay, so when you have less profit than what you expected, that means your overall profitability went down, and the decision of favorable or adverse is taken on the basis of profitability. Now, what does this mean? Are your profit going up or your profit is going down? If your profit is going down, then it is adverse, and clearly this is where we had a negative profit, negative variance, which means that this would be adverse. Okay, so you must write that. That's correct, it is adverse. Bilawal, I think you're talking about the 3-mark explain question. So in the 3-mark explain question, you don't have to necessarily connect it to the case study. You can do it without it. If you want to do with it, that's perfectly fine, but it is not necessary. Okay, so our 3 markers different. So yeah, Mohit, just the difference in the 3 marker in paper 1 and paper 2, and I'll just quickly show it to you again, is that in paper 2, your knowledge mark is definitely for the definition. In paper 1, 3 markers, you don't talk about the definition, because in paper 1, 3 marker, they're asking about advantages, factors, and those sort of things. So that, yes, there is a difference. Yeah, so it wouldn't be favorable because you thought that you will make 3,900 profit, you made 3,200. So did you make more profit or less profit? You made less profit by how much? less by 6,500. So if it's less than what you thought, and we're talking about profit here, that makes it adverse. Does that make sense, Yasser? Okay, now this is where your answer will now take a big shift, in the sense that now everything, and actually about B part 1 was also purely application, because we were dealing with the numbers that were in the case study. B part 2 is now we have to use all the other parts of the case study, even the calculations. So application takes center stage, and B part 2 is always linked to B part 1. So if you notice that B part 2 asked you to explain one way Drake could use the budget data in table 2.1. So this is exactly the same, right? They asked us to talk about the profit variance, then they're talking about budget data here, so they're both linked to it. Now, this is where you need to recall the benefits of using that. Whenever they ask you one way, that word indicates that they want you to talk about the advantage of it. So, or the uses of it, right? So they're asking that if now, if Drake could project, so remember budgeting is all forecasting. So if Drake can forecast that the profit will be less, and less by how much? By 650. If that's what he's projecting, then he can use that data right now to maybe turn that adverse variance into a favorable one. Okay, now if I can just quickly take you back to the data here, we're given here that profit is 3,900 was budgeted, 3,250 was actual, so 650 was the adverse variance. Now profit is a result, or profit is a factor of revenue and cost, so they're both given here. Now since you have to use the data, one way to answer this question would be that Drake can use the profit variance data to make the 650 adverse variance into a favorable one. And remember, 3 marker would need one knowledge into applications. We'll have to discuss the case study. So what I can mention here that revenue is, if you notice, 5,400 is what they're thinking, and 4,000 what will actually happen, right? So this was what happened, and this is what they were thinking. So clearly their revenue projection was not right. They thought 4,500, they thought we are going to do really well, but actually they only ended up having 4,000. So going forward, he can use the profit variance data or the entire budget data to maybe project a better revenue number and better cost number, so that you don't have a profit variance, right? That's the way you use budgeting, and that's the sequence I'm going to use to answer the question for you guys now. Okay, so first things first, let me show you, discuss the requirements. So what you're given marks for is 1 mark for knowledge. So you'll have to write clearly how they can use it, and then show that same process by using the data in table 2.1. Okay, I'll answer your questions in a minute, guys. Just sort of feeling it right now. So I will type it up, and let me make the text a little bit bigger, the font. So budget data and start referring to the case study as much as possible. In table 2.1 can be used by Drake to convert the $650 adverse profit variance into a favorable, that's not how it's spelled, favorable variance. Okay, so clearly I'm just saying that how can I use it? So that's pure knowledge there. Then I need to show, okay, then how will Drake go about doing it? So he can use the revenue data. I could have also talked about cost data. Just pick any one of the two. It's entirely up to you. Revenue data, which was, and we saw that it was 500 adverse. You could talk about adverse can be used as a reference point to make better projections in 2025, and that is that. Okay, so two clear layers of application. I'll highlight it to show where those two layers are. First one is this. He can use the revenue data, which is 500 adverse, and then I bring in this again, and this can be used as a reference to make better projections. So this is how they're using it, and I stated it very clearly in the beginning that this is what I'm going to talk about. So that was knowledge. Oops. So this is my knowledge part. This is application 1, and finally application 2. Okay, you need these layers. Right, couple of questions. So do you suggest doing topicals or going straight to yearlies for past year practice? So Mohit, you're attempting topicals when you are doing your full revision, or just going through your unit by unit, chapter by chapter. That's where at the end of each chapter, what I recommend is that you should be attempting at least all paper 1 only. I'm talking about. So at least 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and 12 mark question, right? So that if you're able to answer one of each type after each chapter, that means that you have understood the syllabus well enough. Once you're done with those, that's when you go to yearlies. Okay, and with yearlies you start backwards: 2025, 2024, then 23, go up to 2020. 5 years should be enough. If you go further back, that's entirely up to you, depends on how much time you have, but that's what I would recommend. Obviously when you do yearlies, that's when you focus on paper 2 as well. Hello Tanya, sir, could you use the answer from part A as an application for part B? Yeah, so the entire case study is entirely up to you to use. You can bring part A to part B, C or D. You can use the calculation in part D or part C. So it's really in fact, the examiners like the fact that you can use different parts of the case study to make your answers better. So actually that's encouraged. Right, guys, so with this, you would have answered 4 marks by now. First part was 4 marks, this one 6 marks, a combo of 3 and 3. So that's 10 marks out of the way, and you're really looking to get full marks here. Maybe one margin for errors, maybe 1 mark, maybe 2 maximum, right, in the 2-3 mark answers. But now that we know how to go about it, the process remains the same each time. So with enough practice, I think you can get that practice done really well. So that's part A and part B. Now let's look at what we have as part C. So part C, and let me just check out part B as well. So this is done, this is done, this is done. We're moving along nicely. How's everybody doing? Are we doing well? What's happening? How's the preparation? Where's our mind at? Ramadan's almost gone. As I always say, oh, abhi to start with hai. Are you at that point? I'll be honest, this year I've really felt them. Really. So I mean, I feel like I'm trying to catch up with everything in this Ramadan. So, how about you guys? You guys are obviously more energetic than I am. I would stay up all night and day during Ramadan when I was your age and still be okay to go to school. How are you guys doing? I'm half Santa Claus. Okay, I'll wait. It's a tough room today. Hey, should I do a magic trick? I don't know magic. Anyways, I'm here to do a job. So, part C is analyze two possible limitations for LAF as a labor intensive operation. So, purely operations, 8 mark question will always ask you, oh, thank you, Bilal. Well, that's good enough. I understand that by a single word. So analyze two, so they'll only ask for 2 points. Your 8 marker will give you 2 marks for knowledge, two for application, four for analysis. I'll show you the format the same way as paper one. Before you start answering it, just quickly go back to the case study and just sort of see what information you have on operations or labor intensive, anything that you can use as application in your answer. So the early part of the case study, there was no mention of any worker there, so I'll move on from there. And then as part of his business plan, that's where we see that he will have to hire 5 fully qualified lawyers. So I'm gonna make an aesthetic here, and I'll make it in blue, that I could use this point here. Remember, labor intensive, I can use the numbers. Anytime you use numbers as application, the examiner really likes it. So use that. He'll also be hiring 3 administrators. So that's where I can use that information in my answer. Then this part here, that while he's concerned that about the limitations LF will face as a labor intensive operation. So straight off the bat, the things that oh, there are more comments coming here. So it's just the delay. We're still friends. Okay, good, good, good. I'm glad. I was thinking the worst. So Ramadan was good. Studies are going on. And yes, I've been utilizing my time by using all. That is great to hear, Yasser. You are making the best use of it, and that's what I hope. Starting overall made through now looking for okay, and yeah, it's good. So right now we get into the serious mode. Had to get through this. It's a blessing, of course. And now serious business, which is collecting ED. Okay, I'm starting to lose it, so let's get back to it. Right, so labor intensive. What are the problems with being labor intensive? The limitations: one, it's not 24/7. Two, quality might be inconsistent. Three, there is labor cost. Four, you have to motivate them. Five, you have to create a culture, and those are things that you have to deal with when you have more workers. Another thing that related to the case study is that this business is a website, right? Which means it will be 24/7. So if it's 24/7, then obviously workers can't work 24/7. So that would be a limitation clearly when I look at it from the business's perspective. So that's the evaluation that I will reserve for the last paragraph. Additionally, if they do decide to have 24/7 services and have half the people work during the day, half the people work during the night, then that creates problems for work-life balance. Remember, that's another discussion you can bring in from labor intensive. So this is the 8 marker. I just remembered. So you don't have to have an evaluation, but I can talk about two limitations starting now. It's so weird, YouTube does this censoring thing that whenever somebody asks for ED, it just censors it out. So I'm just letting you guys know that anything you write about ED, I can't see. So try something else. Be clever. Right. So what I'm going to do now is take this part C question and bring it here to the side where I have some space to type it up. Okay, let's discuss. And again, I recommend that you always take a moment to plan your answer before you start writing. So you're asked to write about 2 points. So you have 2 paragraphs, and each paragraph, it has enough information that you get 1 mark for knowledge, you get 1 mark for application. So what means that you have to write a fact about the concept, then use a point from the case study and explain how the business might be benefited or might be limited due to that factor. So as long as you do that over 2 paragraphs, you will get your 2 marks. Okay, 8 marks. Sorry. So one more thing that I always say about these 8 markers is that a simple trick for each paragraph, and a little trick that I say in my head is that each paragraph is as easy as 1, 2, 3. What I mean by that is you need to have one clear line of knowledge in your answer. So a factual thing about it, let me write it in bold there. So one line for knowledge, at least 2 lines for application. So this is the reason and this is what's happening, or any enough detail that you can write 2 things in application, and a 3-layered analysis. Okay, so that's a sort of a block by block structure of a paragraph for an 8 marker. So if you do this from this to this, that's 4 marks. You do this 2 times, that's 8 marks. Okay. So I recommend to you guys that you refer to a debt factor when looking for ED this time around. Look to settle your own dues. Yeah. Even in ED, I'm teaching. This is profound level now. Right. So what I will do, guys, is that write one paragraph to show you how it's done, and then you can get an idea and write the second one on your own. So let's type it up. Now, you don't need a definition in an 8 marker. Okay, so straight away go to the first point of knowledge, that what's one limitation. So one limitation, and make it about the business. So LAF might face when becoming labor intensive is the additional labor cost. Okay, this is good enough for 1 mark of knowledge straight away. Okay, very, very factual, nothing fancy here. Then you bring in your application, make sure that's from the business. And since we're talking about additional labor cost, I just saw that there were 5 qualified lawyers and 3 administrators that they're going to hire. So I'm going to use that information to bring in my application here. Let me just switch colors so it becomes a little bit more apparent. I'm going to go purple, why not? So this is my application part, that Drake plans to hire 5 qualified lawyers and 3 administrators to run the website. So bring the reason here, then explain what this means for the business, what will change. The qualified lawyers would demand high salaries in comparison to the administrators, but it is still a significant increase in the workforce. So still just talking about application here. Now I'll go into my analysis. So the question is only about the limitations, right? And I'll just highlight it here. Analyze 2 possible limitations. 2 possible limitations. So we have to talk about drawbacks, disadvantages, and when I talk about that, so the addition of these 8 workers will increase the payroll, not posse roll, payroll for garlic mayo roll, will increase the payroll for Drake to 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 Drake for Drake. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, so that's the first impact. Well, there is now a payroll. By the way, is the word used for the pay for the salaries that are given out to workers. And remember, these would be salaries. These are not part time; these are full time workers. So the HR costs increase. This increases the labor cost, labor and recruitment cost for LAF. Thus, this is your favorite statement, guys, thus reducing their profit further. Now, this is where I'll tell you how to elevate your answers even further, how to impress the examiner, right? So remember I said use numbers as much as possible, and this just appeared in my head that I'm talking about profit here, and I just found out that they have a profit variance, right? So what I can say here is that, well, this will put them even further in variance. So the variance might increase from 650. So if I use that in my answer, the examiner says, bravo, you must be Suryavar's student. So so I just want to further and increase the profit variance of 650. That, people, is what you need for 4 marks. This is one whole paragraph, something that I'm happy to get behind. That this was my, excuse me, this was my knowledge here, this was my application here, this is my analysis here. You put these 3 together from here to here, that's what? 4 marks. You do another one here, similar knowledge, application, analysis, take another 4 marks. The other limitation could be that you can't have 24/7 services on the website, so you won't be able to generate more revenue. You could also say that you will have to motivate workers. You would say that their work-life balance might be disrupted if they're asked to work at night to service the website, and that means more payments and more holidays, maybe, and things like that. So there's plenty to discuss there. But I hope that you understand how you go about 8 marker in paper 2. And something that I would really like to highlight is that I made sure my answer was full of application, right? 5 qualified lawyers, 3 administrators, website, Drake, LAF, profit variance 650. It is full of information about the business. Right. Wow. I thought there'd be more labor-intensive operations questions, but this seems to be about my ED. So, right, let's settle this. Again, it's just getting censored. Mr. Shuja, sir, make me your no. Prathama says ED. I think ED should be monetary. Otherwise, it loses its charm. Money is where it's at, right? Do you give guest papers? Yes, I do. Just as soon as the time comes near, when I'm more certain of it, I will post them. Don't worry, for sure. So we'll talk about the 3 tiers and analysis. I didn't get. Okay, so the 3 layers. What the 3 layers and analysis mean is that yes, you want to talk about something happening to their profit or revenue and cost, but don't jump to that statement straight away. What the examiner wants to see is that can you connect. Can you show a logical sequence of things? Is there a chain of events? So if you want to say profit goes down, show them how it happens. And what they want is that they want to see at least 2 links in your analysis. They want to see that one thing leads to another, that leads to another, and therefore your profit goes down. It simply says profit goes down, then that's just too generic. It doesn't tell them how it's happening. And if you look at the marking scheme as closely as I have, those are the little clues that they tell you that if you give us 3 layers, which means you've had 2 connections, which means we've seen developed analysis, they'll give you 2 marks for it there. Okay. Right, so how are we doing, people? Oh, I forgot I had coffee. Oh, wow. Is it all right? Okay, so let's get back to it. And by it, I don't mean easy. So we are now done with part C as well, which brings us to the final boss. Okay, now if you were looking at this paper particularly as a whole, this would be the second case study. So this question would be the last question you will be answering. And as I said a little bit earlier, that you usually struggling for time by the end. So by the time you get to this 12 marker, you will feel a little bit pressed for time. That's normal, that's fine. Don't rush the earlier questions because you're thinking there's a 12 marker in the end. Because if you do well in everything else but this 12 marker, you've still done well enough to get a good grade. So don't just skip things, don't rush through things. Remember, part A and part B are low hanging fruits. Those are 12 marks that are not 12. That's 6 and 4, 10, 20. Those are 20 marks out of 60. That's just there for you to take for free. So don't skip over those parts. And the coffee is C20 creme brulee latte iced. I feel their coffee is more frothy, which is what I like. So yeah. Anyway, so the 12 marker. So evaluate the most important responsibility that Drake has as the owner of LAF. So a question like this, a 12 marker, will award you 2 marks for knowledge, 2 marks for application, 2 for analysis, and another 6 for evaluation, right? Now, what I always say is your paragraphing of a 12 marker is really dependent upon the type of question or how the information is given to you. And the particular type of question we have today for a 12 marker is actually one that makes our life easier. Because anytime you see bullet points like these, that's a clue from the examiner that here is the application that we want you to talk about. Okay, so and we count these up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've got 6 different parts here to Drake's business plan. Now listen to this very carefully. The examiner does not want you to talk about all 6. Please don't be in the hurry that I need to talk about all of them, and that way you're not talking enough about any of them. So go a little easy and relax and remind yourself of what I'm going to tell you now is that the examiner, yes, they want to test your knowledge on everything, but they also want to see, can you identify the more important reasons, the more significant, the more pressing problems than the less significant, the less pressing problems. So whenever you're given a whole list of things, as we are given here, there are 6 bullet points, you divide it by half. So if there are 6 here, I only look at 3. And from these 6, you will then judge. And remember, this is all up to you. What the 3 that I pick might be different from the 3 that you pick. And that's perfectly fine. That's the beauty of a case study and an evaluative answer. So you pick any 3. If there were 4, I'll probably discuss 2. Now there are 6 here. If there were 3, I'll still discuss 2. All right, so it needs at least 2 paragraphs, at least 2 points. If it's 6 here, then it makes it easy for me. I'll have at least 3 out of these 6, which I will definitely talk about. The question is asking, well, these are his responsibilities, which ones are more important? So I'll take 3 of the more important ones. And then my final evaluation will be a decision about those 3, among those 3, which one is the most important, because the questions asked of that. Remember the question saying, evaluate the most important. So we'll have to give a decision that what's most important for Drake as the owner of LAF. Okay, Alvina, answer that question in a minute. So let me just quickly recap what we were told here about the responsibilities he has. So Drake has left his job and is focusing full time on the website. He rebranded the website as LAF. Drake's business plan for LAF included, so we're given 6 things here. Operating as a sole trader. Now, what does that mean? First, recall in your mind that being a sole trader means you are the sole owner of the business, which means all the decision making will belong to Drake. So that's a good thing that he'll get to keep all the profits. However, the problems of being a sole trader is that you will have to manage the teams, you have to manage the finances, you'll have to work 24/7 because it's a website, so you'll have, more longer working hours. So yes, being a sole trader is important to make all the decisions because it's his website, but at the same time, it will mean that he can't look at all the things equally. So there'll be some problems in running it. So that's one point. I think I will definitely use this. So I'll take this one. The second one is continuing to develop and expand the website to provide legal advice and paid legal service. So this is what they were doing before, legal advice. So they'll continue doing that. But in addition, they want to make it paid. So which means, the revenue coming in. Now, if you remember, they already make a little bit of revenue by selling ad spaces on their website. So, it's keeping them afloat. Getting more revenue will be nice. So that's another thing to look at. Okay. Then renting an office in City G where all employees would work. So you need a place to work so that people can come there, develop company culture, interact with each other. That works well for communication, for efficiency, team morale, and those things. So you want to get the team going. So that's also important. Hiring 5 fully qualified lawyers. Now, this would become probably what I can say that this might become their USP, that online advice with fully qualified lawyers. So I think if you want to charge people, then you need to have quality, which comes by having qualified lawyers. I think that's also something that I will use. Um, then hiring 3 administrators. Now, 3 administrators would mean that his job of being a sole trader becomes a little bit easier because these administrators can then look at the operational things, maybe the sales things, and then he can focus on maybe getting finances and working with budgeting and things like that. So I think it sort of supports the discussion of operating as a sole trader. So I'll also talk about this. And last one, leasing IT equipment. Now, the question here is about IT equipment. Obviously, you need that to run a website, but at the same time, the question is also about leasing. So the benefit of leasing would be that you don't have to pay anything upfront. You can make a small token payment and then pay the rest in installments. However, you're committed to cash outflows for the next few years and in the months coming up. So you're a new business, if you already have to pay interest and your lease payments, then your cash flow becomes a little problematic. You might not be able to survive. So actually, let's talk about this one. I'm not going to talk about the 3 administrators because I'm already talking about lawyers. So let's talk about leasing IT equipment. Okay, so pick any 3 you like. I just picked these 3 because they're all different from one another. Yeah, that's what I would recommend. Make sure they're different from one another. So the first one is just about entrepreneurship. This one's about HR. This one's about operations. So make them different, and then we will give an evaluation in the end. Hello, Alvina. So can I do 12 marker first? No, don't do that, Alvina. Don't attempt a 12 marker first because part A, part B are easier questions. Then when you do part C, and after having done part A, B, and C, only then you would have read the case study enough times to answer the 12 marker fully. Okay, now this one, we're just lucky that all the information that we need is towards the end. But we still need to know the entire case study well enough to write a proper evaluation. So always attempt the 12 marker in the end. Okay. Right. So now, since we have 3 points of discussion here, I will probably end up making 4 paragraphs here. So 3 for each point here, and then the last one for my evaluation. Okay, so entirely up to you. Remember, whenever you feel like you're talking about something different in your answer, that's when you make a paragraph. And as I do, I've just brought this question here to the side so that right, we all know it's a 12 marker. So there we go. Let me just set it up. I think my font size is too big. I need to just fix that. Now, what I will do is, since I'm talking about 3 different points, I'll make a 1 full paragraph of one of the 3. Then obviously you can talk about the other ones on your own, or I'll quickly discuss it. And then I want to focus on the evaluation because that's really important. So again, no definition needed here. Go straight to the point. And as to talk about the first responsibility, I highlighted that one of Drake's what happened there? One of Drake's Drake's responsibilities would be to sorry guys, would be to continue to operate as a sole trader. Okay. Now, when I highlight that, that means that's the first sort of application that's already there. So my knowledge, I have to throw that in there somewhere. So what does that mean? Who's a sole trader? You know, you could define it if you like, you can mix it up, but you need to still get your knowledge marks, which means you have to define things in there. Okay. So continue to operate as sole trader, which would mean that he has full control over decision making and in in addition to doing most of the tasks himself. Okay, so I've explained and applied it all together in this one long sentence. So one of Drake's responsibilities would be to continue to operate as a sole trader. So I picked that application, which would mean that he has full control over decision making in addition to doing most of the tasks himself. So that's what a sole trader is. That's what Drake is. And now I have to talk about, well, what are the tasks that he has to do, or what are the decisions he has to make, so that I can talk about this. I need application. So Drake would need to find an office space, hire and organize the new workforce, and manage upgrading, manage the, I'll use better words, manage the transition to becoming more labor intensive. Okay. Now notice how I'm bringing so many things from the case study into my answer. You know, think of it like a biryani. You throw in some star anise, you throw in some long, some this, some that. You know, you want a nice steam, that smell to come out when it opens. So flavorful. Flavorful is what we want. And flavor comes from having a case study like biryani and fully shown into your answer. So if they're becoming more labor intensive, being a sole trader means that he will need to manage all of this while also managing other parts of the business, such as profit variance. So I'm bringing in variance, I'm bringing in finance here. So just highlighting how his plate is already full, and it'll become even fuller when he's a larger business. So so now the impact, yeah, so one more thing. Remember, this is a 12 marker. The analysis needs to be balanced, which means one advantage, one disadvantage. You need to have both in your answer here. So some of the tasks may not be done in time, leading to inefficiency. However, Drake, what are you, Drake? Drake would get to keep all the profit of the business. Okay, so a full proper paragraph of what's one responsibility, what are the things he'll have to do, what's the benefit of doing that, what's the benefit of not doing it, or what's the drawback of doing it. So that's where you have your full knowledge, application, and analysis. Then remember, you need to have at least one statement of evaluation before you move on. So sort of a passing comment on this, that okay, this is what's happening, he's still a sole trader, is it important, should he become one, what's the bigger drawback. So just sort of a judgment on whether this is good or bad. And one of the bigger drawbacks of being a sole trader, apart from doing all the work, is that your expansion might be limited because your finance is limited. So that's a judgment, that's a comment that I think Drake needs to know when he's thinking, should I remain a sole trader or become a partnership, for example. So that comment is what I'm going to bring here. Let me just change color so that that becomes obvious that this is evaluation, that being a sole trader also means that further growth will be limited as finances are limited to Drake's personal saving. So a comment that is very much about the case study, it's still a judgment about being a sole trader and still applies to the business. So, perhaps I'm using more words. I always go extra as a big paragraph. I know you are daunted by it. Don't be. I just go in more detail so that you guys have enough knowledge, enough information to use any part you want in your answers. So, this would give you the comfort that this is pretty good for the first responsibility of Drake's, right? You know what, I like I said, I will discuss three, so I'll do another one so that we are more confident with our process here. So another responsibility is to get latest IT equipment through leasing, right? So two parts to it, IT and leasing. So to run the website with more efficiency, LAF plans to upgrade equipment and also to provide tools for the new hires, new workers. Okay, so again, bringing my application that there's new people, we have to give them equipment. Oh, it's a website, it's already capital intensive. So the company is clearly transitioning to becoming a capital intensive business. Okay, now leasing the equipment would reduce the need to make initial cash outlay. That's the term you used. You don't pay all of it upfront. So would reduce the need to make initial cash outlay and allow LAF to use the equipment while paying for it in future monthly installments. Right, so that's my first advantage, the analysis part. Remember, analysis should have both advantage and disadvantage. So, however, let me just move my answer up a little bit so I have space to write. However, another one of our favorite words. However, where to go? Sorry, LAF would be tied to making monthly cash outflows to pay for the future, to pay in the future, which will also include interest payment, adding to the overall cost of running the business. Right, so clearly one advantage, one disadvantage. Yeah, say biryani. Right, so we've got that. Now remember, you ended with a comment of evaluation. So I'm gonna do it in thick again. So we talked about, well, they're doing it because they're going to become, they want to use your capital intensive equipment and tools and things like that. Yes, by leasing it, you don't have to pay right away. However, you have bigger cash outflows to follow. Now, a judgment on that is this good? Is this bad? Is this the bad? Is this probably the only option or the best option? That's something that you want to talk about. So what I would say here is that they get to use it without owning it, right? So that's one thing I could say. I think what I want to talk about here is that since it's a young business, cash flow is important. Therefore, perhaps tying more payments in the future might not be a good idea. So that's what I would say. That since the business is still in its early days, committing to future cash outflows might make survival difficult. And that is good enough for a comment of evaluation towards the end of this. Okay, so if I could just show you what we've done so far, is that we've talked about 2 of the 3 responsibilities that we have to, right? So I've done 2, you can do a third one, which would be similar process. Start with bit of knowledge, application, talk about the case study as much as you can, bring numbers if you can, analysis. Remember, both you need an advantage, you need a disadvantage, and then a line of evaluation there. So once you do that, you've got 2, then here, let me just write it down, that this space is for the third responsibility. Okay. And it will have the same sequence in the sense that you will need knowledge, you need application, you need analysis, both positive and negative, and a brief comment of evaluation. Then comes the last paragraph. Okay, now evaluation is the name of the game here, and what I wanna just remind you guys of something that we were talking about right at the start of this session, that whenever Mr. Yaver, whenever I'm thinking of evaluation, how am I doing, right? What's my process? So in my mind, there are 5 terms, it's a checklist of things. There are 5 things that I need to think about if I want to get good evaluation in my answer. And I'll list them down here for you again. Starting with the first one is that evaluation is all about providing a judgment, which means that you have to be certain, right? The question will ask you that yes or no, is this good, is this bad? What is another way they would ask you is that what is most important? So some sort of a judgment or some sort of a decision is what you'll be asked to make. Don't sit on the fence with it. Make sure that you decide on one. When they say the most important, the most term means that there can only be one. So the one that you pick could be any one of the 3 that you've discussed. Remember, there is no right or wrong. It's what you choose and how you choose to then logically prove it in your answer. Okay, so a judgment on which is the most important one. Then any solutions that if you feel you can provide something that might work for the business, a recommendation. That's also something that you bring in your evaluation. Number 3, any obstacles that you think might appear because of what's going to happen. Okay, so for example, one of the things that we've talked about is that they might see that in the future cash flow might be a problem, right? So how can I bring that into my final evaluation? Well, if they're thinking of surviving, they're thinking of expanding, which is what they're doing right now. Remember in the case study, they said that they want to expand and start charging people. So if you want to expand and start charging people, you need to make sure that your working capital is enough to keep your business going. If you don't keep the business going, if you don't provide the service, then there's no revenue coming in. So I can use that there as an obstacle. Then, excuse me. Number 4, any change in the external environment that might have been provided in the case study. So sometimes they might say that, oh, the society is changing, there's more competition, or any other external environment thing. You definitely connect it to the answer. And then lastly, impact on other departments. Okay, now you don't have to talk about all 5. Let me say that again. You don't have to talk about all 5, but you definitely have to talk about the first one, a judgment, and then go through this checklist, and at least half of them should be there. So if you 3 out of 5, I'd be very happy with. If you can find more, that's great. So that's just sort of the process that I have in my mind. And just to sum up the case study we have in our hands is that Mr. Drake started his own website. He already has 20,000 users. Now he wants to expand. Although he has an adverse profit variance, he thinks this is the right time to expand. So he's left his job. He has rebranded the business as LAF. And he has a business plan where we've identified that the 3 most important responsibilities he has is being a sole trader, because he wants to drive the growth and still make all the decisions. However, it has its pros and cons. The other responsibility was that you need to upgrade your equipment, which means that you can become more efficient. You don't have to pay the money up front. However, your future cash flow might be in trouble. A third point we had picked was that he will need to hire 5 qualified lawyers. Now, that's important because then you can offer quality. That means you've added value. Value addition means you can charge a higher price, and that's where you can then start having paid legal services, so your revenue start coming in. The drawback is that your qualified workers are limited to the time of day. This is a website, it's a 24/7 business, so you may not be, you're paying them for half the day's work when you need full day's work, and that's a problem. And if you need to ask them to work in the night, then work-life balance becomes a problem. So those 3 are the most important responsibilities we have highlighted. Now we have to start answering that. What is important? Why is it important? Okay, so I'm going to start doing that here. So the most important, answer the question first. Most important responsibility is, and which one are we picking? I think let's go with being a sole trader, right? His whole business, he wants to be in control. He's made his own business plan, so let's stick with that. So the most important is being a sole trader of LAF to continue to execute the vision of the company as Drake had perceived, right? So I think that's important. What's also important now, here's where I can bring in other parts of the case study, is that being a website allows, sorry, not a website, hiring the right workers can free up Drake. Where to go? Free up. Oh, where to go? Oh, where are we? Sorry, guys, 1 second. Free up Drake from the everyday work and focus on business growth and finding the right office space, which is also vital. He then again, since he's a sole trader, what are the things he can do? That's what I'm thinking. Any solutions? Then now I'm thinking about the solution part of evaluation, and he can look to acquire more capital from external sources for expansion. So that's probably a solution. Any obstacle? We've already discussed that being a sole trader means that his time is limited. So try not to repeat what you're saying. Evaluation is always trying to add to the conversation rather than just repeating things that you already talked about. Okay. So any other obstacle or external environment? I guess you can say that he can face competition. Actually, I don't want to talk about that because that's not part of the case study. What else was there? Office space. He needs to start charging people, right? So maybe that's something that I can use. So he can decide the charges for the paid legal advice without anyone interfering. So just explaining why being a sole trader helps, and in the end pocket the entire profit as well. And any impact on other departments? Not really, because he is the one who's controlling the entire business, so it doesn't really impact us. So like I said, these are the 5 things I'm thinking. I'm very happy with 3 of them, and that's what I've done here. So my friends, this is the effort you need to put in for a 12 marker. And again, I will say, don't be scared by the size of the answer. Remember, I go a little bit extra to make sure you have all the knowledge you can use, but the structure remains the same. The first paragraphs are a combination of knowledge, application, analysis, and a bit of evaluation. Then the last one is decision, judgment, solution, obstacle, external environment, etc. And that, people, is how you attempt a paper 2, and make sure that you're forcing the examiner to give you as close to full marks as possible. So, how are we doing? I've done this in an hour and a half. You'll have to do this in 45 minutes. Obviously, you won't be doing any explaining. Don't do that. You'll get thrown out. Yeah, Bilal, like I said, you don't have to talk about all of them. As long as three of them are there, that's fine. Are there any other questions? No, we're good. Okay. Like I said, as before, I said in paper one, spread the word of this recording, share it with your friends. It might help them. Anybody you can help. Most importantly, I hope it was useful to you. Use it, execute it. Would you advise for solving this paper? How do you mean, Sonala, like as a whole, like how you attempt the entire paper too? Because both case studies are the same sequence of questions, same way of answering them, just different content, you know. Um, so I'm not sure what exactly you mean there. Great, Tanya. Thank you for being here and listening in always. I hope this was helpful. Time management. Oh, okay, that's fine. Okay, so let me just quickly go over time management. So this paper is worth 60 marks. So 60% of your AS grade will be coming from your paper two. You have two equally weighted case studies, which means if you split up an hour and 30 minutes of paper two into two halves, that means per case study you have 45 minutes. Okay. Now you take away 10 minutes of that time for reading, going back and forth between answers. So that takes away that time. You have 35 minutes of actual writing time. Okay. Now your 8 marker, the best way to do this is that your 8 marker, you should limit it to between 12 to 14 minutes of time. Your 12 marker, you're giving 20 minutes. So if you're giving 20 minutes for 12 marker, you're giving 12 marks for your 12 minutes, sorry, for your 8 marker. That how many is that? That's 20, that's 32 right there. So you have to really speed up writing your answers. So part A is a quick one, right? 1 marker is 1 minute, 3 markers another 3 minutes, maybe 4. So 4 minutes there, calculation another 4 minutes, that's 8 minutes. So you have to really squeeze in the time. And when you look at it as a whole, just make sure that if it's taking you a little bit more time to do the first case study, but you think that time is better used in finishing the 12 marker of the first case study really well, then spend the extra 5 minutes to that. So if the first case study takes 50 minutes, but it means you can score 25 out of 30 in the first one, then I would give it that extra 5 minutes. And then you go into the second case study, and yes, you will feel a little pressed for time in the end by a 12 marker. But you know, in a 12 mark answer, 9 is a great answer. 9 is 75%, 9 out of 12, that's an A answer. So that's it's kind of like a ceiling and you know, nice target to get at. But if you have enough time to write enough for a 7 or an 8 out of 12 by the end, yes, you're still doing well. So just manage your time with those parameters. If you're not sure I understand that comment, could you explain? But I hope, Sanala, I was able to answer your question. Right, so that's it I have for you guys for today. Spread the love, spread the word. You know, I hope you guys are able to make the best use of these sessions. You know, anything, everything that I have discussed in both the paper and paper two sessions can be applied to any past paper that you attempt. So you feel the need to recall some of the concepts, just come back to this video again, look at what I've said about it, and then go about answering it. Okay, so thank you for being here. It was great to have an interactive session as I did today. So thank you, and good luck for your mocks that are coming up. And I'll be back with more sessions before CAIE. So keep following our page. Visit the website. There's some really cool free stuff also on our store that you can use for your preparation. Of course, there's better stuff hidden in the closets in the platform. So Take care, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye bye.